We see clear signs that Russia is preparing for further acts of aggression. They go far beyond Ukraine. It threatens the Baltic countries, threatens Moldova, threatens other parts of Europe.
This was stated by the Chancellor of Germany. NATO has already named a specific year when the Kremlin may have enough forces to strike. Russia itself claims that it has no such intentions. There are none, cynically calling these warnings scare stories. Meanwhile, the intelligence services of Lithuania and Poland are issuing simultaneous warnings. A provocation on the eastern border is being prepared right now.
Well, this is just the latest batch of such scare stories.
Where would Russia get the resources if it's at war with Ukraine? When does NATO predict a possible attack? And what is already happening on the border with Russia while diplomats argue? Let's figure it out. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, NATO seriously reinforced its eastern flank for the first time in decades. Alliance battle groups appeared in all three Baltic countries and Poland, and defense budgets began to rise, year after year. For a long time, the official rhetoric of the Allies boiled down to a simple formula. The main war is in Ukraine, and therefore the direct threat to NATO members is hypothetical and distant, hypothetical and remote. But over the past year, this formula has started to crack. More and more often, politicians and military officials are stating that the Kremlin's plans are not limited to Ukraine's borders. It all began on July 14th, when Friedrich Merz, after a meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, declared that the war against Ukraine had entered a new phase. For months, Ukraine has been achieving significant successes on the front, while the Kremlin, on the contrary, has not made any substantial territorial gains. This
war against Ukraine, against Europe, has entered a new phase. In recent months, Ukraine has managed to achieve real successes militarily. Our support has obviously contributed to this. The Kremlin, for its part, has not been able to achieve any significant territorial successes to boast about in recent months.
The next day, July 15th, during a press conference in Berlin, the Chancellor went further and stated directly, Russia is preparing for further aggression that goes far beyond the war against Ukraine. Among the possible targets, he mentioned the Baltic countries, Moldova, and other parts of Europe.
We see clear signs that Russia is preparing for further acts of aggression. They go far beyond Ukraine. It threatens the Baltic countries, threatens Moldova, and threatens other parts of Europe. It threatens us as well, and in the way I have just described. But we are quickly making up for lost ground to restore our defense capability.
According to Merz, Germany is already experiencing elements of this aggression. Not in the form of tanks, but in the form of sabotage on its own territory, attempts at espionage and cyber attacks on critical information networks. He summed it up with a phrase that spread across all German media. The country no longer lives in peace, but formally is not yet at war.
We are not at war, but we also no longer live in peace. And taking this threat seriously is, above all, a political task. Describing it, justifying it, explaining it, that is the duty of politics. We must explain to people in Germany why we assess it this way and then draw the right and necessary conclusions from it.
On the same day, July 15th, Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda said in an interview with BNS that Lithuanian intelligence had received signals about preparations for targeted but entirely real attacks on facilities, critical infrastructure, energy, transport, and the synchronization of railways with the European network. The target, according to him, has not yet been identified. Poland and any of the three Baltic states could be under suspicion. At the same time, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski was in the United States. He voiced an even more alarming scenario. According to Polish intelligence, the Kremlin may be preparing a false flag operation using Ukrainian drones to strike the country, NATO, or even on its own territory in Russia in order to obtain a formal pretext for retaliation. Sikorski compared this scheme to the Gleiwitz provocation of 1939, when German agents disguised themselves and staged an attack on a radio station to justify the invasion of Poland. The Kremlin's reaction was delayed. On July 16th, Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov publicly responded to all these statements, calling the Lithuanian warning about preparations for attacks on Baltic infrastructure.
They are generating a continuous stream of frightening and deceptive scare stories. To achieve this objective, they find it necessary to systematically construct the menacing image of a formidable enemy in some other country, which in this specific case happens to be ours, and under this convenient pretext, as we often say, they persist in the strategic deployment and advancement of NATO military infrastructure directly into the sovereign nations within the Baltic region. In all its forms,
Latvia was also targeted. Peskov accused it of pursuing a policy of hatred toward everything Russian. So the overall message is clear. Moscow systematically denies any plans of aggression against Europe, while at the same time continuing to call Western support for Ukraine direct participation in the war. And here arises the main question. If there is no direct threat, when could it appear? In June 2026, the commander of the German army, Lieutenant General Christian Freuding, gave an interview to Politico in which he named the year 2029. And he emphasized that this is not Berlin's own assessment, but a coordinated position of the intelligence services of all 32 alliance countries.
We must be ready for combat. 2029 is not a German deadline. These are intelligence data coordinated with NATO. All 32 NATO partners agree that Russia may have the capability to invade a NATO partner country in 2029.
The same time frame was previously mentioned by German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, who explained exactly what it means. By that time, Russia could theoretically restore its armed forces enough to attempt an attack on an Eastern NATO member. But there is a nuance. According to Swedish intelligence, published in June 2026, Russia's Air Force, Navy, and long-range strike capabilities have suffered as a result of the war. In Ukraine, they have suffered much less than the ground forces. Therefore, a limited military offensive outside Ukraine is something Moscow could theoretically organize even before 2029. British intelligence adds another figure to help understand the scale. According to their estimates, by 2030, the Kremlin plans to form 17 combat divisions and a 1.5 million strong army. At the same time, in February 2026, Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service published a report with the opposite conclusion. Russia does not have the direct military capability or intention to attack a NATO country in 2026 to 2027. According to Estonian analysts, the Kremlin is currently primarily concerned with the rearmament of the European Union itself. And they fear that in 2 to 3 years, Europe itself will acquire the capability for active operations against Russia.
Europe must significantly increase its investments in defense and strengthening its own internal security measures, so that, in the future, Russia is forced to conclude it has absolutely no chance of success against NATO countries.
But even in this cautious report, there is a detail that prevents complete reassurance. According to the same Estonian data, Russia plans to increase the number of troops along the NATO border by 2 to 3 times compared to the pre-war level. While diplomats argue about the timing, satellite images analyzed by journalists show the expansion of Russian military infrastructure near the borders with Norway, Finland, and the Baltic countries. New barracks, ammunition depots, and vehicle lots. According to estimates, after the war in Ukraine ends, the number of Russian troops in this direction could increase to 115,000 personnel. The residents of the Baltics themselves are responding to this not with panic but with systematic preparation. In Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, paramilitary volunteer formations operate, existing alongside the regular armies. The Estonian Kites Elite numbers over 30,000 volunteers, the Latvian National Guard has about 10,000, and the Lithuanian Riflemen's Union approximately 18,000. These are teachers, medical workers, IT specialists, and farmers who undergo military training on weekends. Life on Estonia's border with Russia has already changed. In September 2025, Russian fighter jets violated Estonian airspace. A month later, in October, on a section of the border known as the Saatse Boot, Estonian border guards recorded more than 9 armed individuals in camouflage without insignia. After that, the state closed the transit road that local residents had used for decades. The Estonian border guards, who patrol this line every day, speak about it without dramatizing, but also without illusions. We
can stop the bad guys. The security of Estonia and Europe depends on everything we find at the border. I believe that Russia poses a threat.
According to them, GPS signal jamming for drones and airplanes has been going on for over a year now, and it happens more often than it doesn't. If something like that happens in my country, I want to be able to protect myself, my family, my home. However, a direct full-scale war by Russia against a NATO member is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It is deterred both by Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty on Collective Defense and by Russia's own simple lack of resources. This is exactly what Merz talked about on July 14th. But at the same time, another war is already underway. Without tank columns, without an official declaration, without a front line on the map, sabotage, cyber attacks, drone provocations, jamming of navigation, the Kremlin's denials do not refute anything within this logic. Just as Moscow dismissed preparations for the 2022 invasion of Ukraine as fake news until it actually began. That is why European governments have started talking about specific timelines for rearmament. The window between 2027 and 2029, as mentioned by NATO military officials. This is the benchmark that Europe is trying to prepare for in time. The question remains open. Will Europe manage to rearm before Russia regains its strength? Or will the gap between politicians' bold statements and actual military budgets remain only on paper? Is the threat exaggerated just to justify defense spending? Or, on the contrary, is Europe still underestimating how close this war has come to its own borders? Write in the comments what you think about what you've heard. If you found this episode useful, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.